And stemming from those, we have certain rights to make appeals about the behavior of the state in relation to the citizens. And in fact, we have a precedent over the period in which this has been done. For example, the GHRA has written to request that the United Nations investigate the issue of torture in Guyana. They've written to them and asked them to do that. The visit of the minority expert that came up on to look at ethnic relations, Ms. McDougall, it's also as a result of requests by Guyanese.
Not sanctioned by the state.
Not sanctioned by the state because we're following up the procedures within the United Nations that allow for these matters to be brought. It may be that we may not get the very best inquiry we desire in that particular manner, but I think there's, at least looking at it from the layman's point of view, I have no legal expertise, so persons should take what I say at face value. But my own feeling is that stemming out of those obligations, we can make a justiciable claim that the government should be subject to some sort of inquiry on the issues that we seek to represent in the dossier. Which body would do that and which direction we have to go, we don't know. But further than that, we have also resort to the domestic law within the United States, where some of these trial issues have been given evidence recently. For example, the family of, let's say, Ronald Waddle, to my mind, can make a legitimate claim or a legitimate suit over wrongful death and name person or persons in Guyana in connection with that, because the evidence is certainly strong enough. And if he doesn't have to make a criminal case, but he can make a civil claim for damages. So I think we have to explore all those things, which as a non-lawyer I say may not have any standing, but which to my mind seem to be attractive.
Well, I would say that Clive is not incorrect, but there's a distinction between private action or action which is criminal in nature or civil in nature against specific individuals or a specific government, as distinct from seeking to have a tribunal that basically puts the entire government on trial. And this is what the international inquiry will, in fact, facilitate.
That is to put the entire...
It will, in a sense, because we will be examining the role of the Guyana government in this general sphere of activity where evidence has been revealed that a minister of the government, Minister Ramsamy, obviously acting on behalf of the cabinet and the government, facilitated the purchase of a spy computer. Now, there is no denial that the spy computer was here. There is also no denial that for that to be facilitated, the United States law provides that the government must sanction such a purchase. So if a letter surfaces from Minister Ramsamy, he is not acting on his own. It has to be presumed that he was representing the government of Guyana. Similarly, the evidence surfaced with respect to involvement of the security forces, Roger Khan, a drug lord, self-confessed, and the murder of more than 200 young people in this country who were murdered at the behest of a phantom squad. And it is clear from all the evidence that has been surfaced that directions were issued at certain levels. Certainly, one has to look at this international inquiry as one which will also examine the role of the state that has obligations to uphold the rule of law, has obligations to ensure that those fundamental rights of protection of life and liberty are honored, have been breached by the government of Guyana. You have alongside that the role of individuals in this process. And as has been seen, we can also take further action. And I presume that that is not ruled out should an international inquiry not succeed in the way in which Clive has been saying. Because Charles Taylor, for example, I'm not speaking of the one who's before the Hague. His brother or his son, his son, was charged and placed before a court of the United States and tried, I think, in Florida for torture. Quite distinctly from his father, who's now before the court of the Hague. So that there are procedures for taking action without the government's involvement. For example, one can go to the inter-Caribbean, inter-American institutions, which provide for individuals taking cases where human rights have been trampled. And there are precedents where a number of matters have been raised at that level. We had the disappearance of this young man, Will, some years ago, that was taken, Collie Wills, and that was taken to the American body. And there are cases where matters have been taken before the International Tribunal, separate and distinct from government involvement. But I think because of the magnitude of this matter, I think it will be in the better interest of Guyana if we can achieve that result. But it doesn't rule out individual action against others.
Yeah, but by individual action, what I really meant was party action, party focus on orchestrated action. It's not just individuals randomly making efforts to get a redress in the matter, but the parties in support of individuals who want to make this particular thrust.
So is that one of the vehicles that
Yes.
the joint opposition?
Yeah, this is
political
what I would
parties
argue
will
for.
consider?
I would
Yes.
argue, for example, that the GHRA has previously written to the United Nations on the issue of torture in Guyana, and I feel we should buttress their letter with the supporting dossier that we have to further demand that an inquiry into these issues be undertaken. When they were following a procedure in which other human rights organizations have followed before and have in some cases met with success. So when they sought the intervention of the UN, they were not doing it as a de novo act. They were doing it on the basis of precedent for that type of action.
You raised a very interesting precedent indeed. Charles Taylor from Liberia, where we've
Yeah.
had Pinochet
Yeah, yeah.
in Chile, people disappearing
Yeah, yeah.
and subsequent governments being held accountable. How serious is this issue to this country?
Well, from my point of view, it's as serious as any one of those issues. Because we can't just allow the systematic murder of, in our case in the dossier, we've identified more than 300 persons to be allowed to continue without any further settlement of the issue of justice or any other settlement of the issue of closure for the families and friends of those persons who were killed.
What could be more important than human life itself? And if we as a nation do not hold that sacred, then what is there for us? It's as fundamental, as simple as that, but profound. If we do not respect human life and we hide behind the hammer of the state to give us legitimacy to do whatever we like, where are we heading? I think we know where we're heading, but all of us are afraid to actually say where we're heading. And our job is to prevent us going down at accelerated speed, that slippery slope, because I think we have already embarked on that slope, that slide into
Anarchy.
mayhem and anarchy.
More
That is where we're going. And therefore, it is important for us to recognize that this is not a them problem. There's a we problem. And those who sit back and close their windows and peep out and say, well, it's not me, it will meet you sooner than you expect. And that's why it's important.
Keith, Mr. Keith Scott, you want to add anything to this?
No, I really don't want to sound too individualistic on this program. What I want us to get across is that each of us have had discussions and we all are at one in how we are going to go about this problem and how we're going to solve it. The society needs to understand why we are functioning and why we have gotten together, and the society needs to be brought on board, because we recognize that we are living in a state of anarchy. We recognize that it will not stop unless we ourselves make that ultimate sacrifice, which is to let the society know that we out here are here to stop what is the ills of the society, and we will do whatever it takes to make sure that we rescue our society.
You mentioned society. We all often hear this term, civil society. Here we have only the joint opposition political parties. What sort of linkage is there between the one and the other?
Let me just say quickly that there's a lot of discussion taking place. But rather than, I know the civil society aspect is this organization and that organization, our appeal really will be as broad as possible and to the individuals, every individual, because we are so politicized in this country various organizations